Imagine for a moment a world where your physical perfection, your youthful beauty, wasn't seen as a gift but actually as a potential curse. Where those features that, others admired mark you for a fate far removed from the life you knew. At a tender age, you're chosen not for what you might achieve, but purely for how you look, your smooth skin, your delicate features, maybe the undeniable grace you possess. And as you're taken from everything familiar, you start to grasp that this beauty isn't a blessing at all. It's a commodity. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a profoundly disturbing yet strangely systematic historical practice: the selection of young boys to serve as male concubines. This isn't about modern sensibilities or, fleeting trends. This is about unearthing a historical reality where aesthetic perfection could lead directly to unimaginable servitude and, frankly, suffering.
Yeah, and what's truly striking here is the sheer scale and consistency of this practice across time and cultures. We're talking about imperial courts in China, the grand palaces of the Ottoman Empire, Byzantine royalty. I mean, a really wide sweep of history where this wasn't some kind of anomaly, but a meticulously organized system. Our mission for this deep dive is to go beyond just the what happened and really uncover the how, the clinical precision, the systematic processes behind these selections, and critically, the deeper why that helps us understand the mechanisms of human exploitation. We're going to try and unpack these often forgotten stories.
Okay, so the scene, it would unfold with this unsettling predictability. You picture a quiet village, maybe the morning sun just touching the rooftops, and then suddenly the arrival of strangers. These weren't like common raiders. Their presence was announced by the heavy thud of horses' hooves and maybe the subtle jingle of coins. These were specialists, men who had honed an almost chilling art of human evaluation over decades, serving emperors and sultans whose tastes demanded, well, nothing less than perfection.
Right. And it's vital to connect this to the broader context. These were highly organized operations, far from impulsive acts. Take the Ottoman Empire, for instance. The selectors, often known as Sububashir, they moved through Balkan villages with the precision of, skilled hunters. Their gaze was trained to spot what they termed extraordinary beauty among peasant children, end quote. It really runs as a darker parallel to the Devsham system, where Christian boys were systematically conscripted and trained for military or administrative service. It highlights a similar institutionalized capture of youth, although obviously for very different imperial ends.
So let's picture Mikhail, maybe a 13-year-old boy, as this unfolds. He's confused, right? Standing before a strange man whose hands are cold, clinical, tracing the contours of his face, turning his head to catch the light, running fingers along his jawline. It's as if he's being assessed like a precious stone. Every detail under intense scrutiny.
Exactly. And that initial assessment wasn't random at all. They had very specific criteria they were looking for. They'd immediately observe the curve of the lips, the arch of the eyebrows, the delicate structure of the nose, or maybe how light caught the golden highlights in his hair. It's in these very first moments that the dehumanization process kicks in, transforming a child from a person into a potential commodity, an object to be evaluated.
Wow. And the examination of Mikhail would only get more methodical from there. He's told, open your mouth. His trembling lips part, revealing teeth that are straight, white, completely unmarked by decay, a detail apparently deemed essential for refined palates. Then his hair, the selector runs his hands through it, checking for lice, signs of disease, scars, anything. Thick, lustrous, parasite-free hair was paramount because it would later be, perfumed with expensive oils, styled with precious ornaments. Then the command comes, remove your shirt. His mother, nearby, might try to protest, but she is quickly silenced. His torso, pale and unmarked, is revealed. The selector's hands meticulously map every inch, checking for birthmarks or any imperfections. This process was intentionally humiliating, wasn't it? Immediately establishing this profound power imbalance. Mikhail is then made to parade back and forth, his gait and natural grace observed. These boys, we learn, were expected to move like dancers, embodying a particular ideal of masculine beauty that was both sort of powerful and delicate.
Yeah, and what's truly intriguing is how these aesthetic criteria weren't actually universal. They adapted across different empires. Each developed its own sophisticated art of human evaluation. In the Chinese imperial court, for example, eunuch administrators use this really specialized vocabulary. A boy's eyes might be praised as autumn water for their clarity and depth, his skin as white jade for its luminous quality, and his movements as flowing silk for their grace and control.
Wow, autumn water eyes. That's poetic in a chilling way.
It is, and they paid particular attention to hands and feet, believing that small, delicate extremities were signs of noble character. Examiners would spend minutes scrutinizing fingers, testing flexibility, the shape of nails, the smoothness of palms. Feet, too, needed to be well-proportioned and unblemished. Voice quality was also critical. Boys were asked to speak, recite poetry, or sing, with selectors listening for clarity and pitch. A voice too deep, or, say, too thin, might be deemed unsuitable for the court.
And then the Byzantine Empire, drawing heavily from classical Greek ideals, they had their own distinct system, right?
Exactly. They sought boys who embodied the proportions celebrated in ancient sculpture, believing in a harmony of features that connected physical beauty to spiritual perfection.
So what specifically were they looking for?
Well, Byzantine selectors focused intently on the profile, that elegant line from forehead to nose to chin, and the precise proportions of ears, the length and grace of the neck, the breadth and symmetry of the shoulders. The ideal candidate, according to court poets, possessed what they called the soul of a gazelle. Gentle, graceful, alert, but, and this is key, ultimately submissive.
Gentle, graceful, alert, but submissive. That combination says a lot.
It does. And beyond these really exacting physical standards, there was a subtle, yet equally critical psychological evaluation. Selectors would engage boys in conversation, not out of genuine interest, obviously, but to gauge their intelligence, their capacity for learning, and their natural temperament. The ultimate goal was, well, psychological malleability. A boy deemed too aggressive might resist training, while one too passive might lack the spark, a spark that would make him interesting to his future owners.
So they were looking for a balance.
A specific balance, yeah.
Yeah.
A candidate who could be shaped, basically, into whatever his masters desired.
And the age range, you mentioned 10 to 14, that seems very specific.
It was carefully calculated. This was the window when boys still retained a kind of androgynous beauty of childhood, but possessed enough physical and mental development to actually begin their rigorous training.
Okay, and health must have been important too.
Physical health was paramount, yes, but it wasn't the robust strength of a peasant they were looking for. It was more a refined kind of health, a delicate constitution that would respond well to the specialized diet, exercise, and medical care provided within the imperial courts.
Right, because this wasn't just about finding someone beautiful, it was an investment.
Exactly. It's important to understand the significant economic dimension to this whole meticulous selection process. These boys represented substantial investments. You've got the cost of acquisition, transport, but also extensive training and ongoing maintenance. Huge costs involved. Selectors were acutely aware that their choices would be evaluated not just on aesthetics, but on a more pragmatic return on investment.
So if a boy didn't work out?
A boy who failed to meet expectations after costly training reflected very poorly on the selector's judgment. Even the families, if they received compensation, were offered payments that, let's be honest, could not truly compensate for the profound loss of a child. Not by any measure.
And once selected, the journey would begin. How did that work?
They were moved in small, carefully managed groups, often disguised maybe as merchant caravans or religious pilgrims, basically, to avoid drawing unwanted attention.
And the journey itself was part of the process.
Oh, absolutely. It served as a brutal form of conditioning. Separated from their homes, isolated from anyone who might offer emotional support. They were gradually introduced to their new status as property. They started learning new languages, adapting to unfamiliar customs. It was the start of erasing who they were.
Which brings us to the final inspection. You painted this scene, holding chambers beneath an imperial palace, flickering oil lamps, stone walls, the air thick with incense, trying to mask the smell of fear and desperation. And here, let's say, 14-year-old Ahmad stands naked, trembling, waiting for his ultimate fate.
Yeah, this is where the power dynamics really solidify. The chief examiner enters. He's clad in silk robes, his hands soft from a life of privilege, but his eyes betray the accumulated cruelty of decades spent evaluating human merchandise. Behind him, assistants carry instruments, documents, all the tools needed to catalog every conceivable aspect of a boy's physical and, crucially, psychological being. The examination begins. It's clinical, and it's invasively thorough.
So Ahmad steps forward, his movements almost automatic, and it's a head-to-toe inventory, isn't it? You describe checking the texture of his hair, pulling it sharply to test the roots.
Looking for quality, how well it might take dyes.
Then the cold metal calipers, measuring his facial symmetry. The probe, checking each tooth for decay.
Even the evenness of the bite, the gum health. The notation might be something like, dental structure excellent, followed by a chilling note about how the mouth will be used.
And evaluating his throat's pitch and quality, pressing the larynx.
Yes, forcing sounds to test pitch. Good clarity, pleasant tone, they might note, ideal for our purposes, will respond well to voice training. Even his voice is being commodified.
It's relentless, mapping his skin for imperfections, testing elasticity, muscle suppleness.
Checking everything.
Yeah.
Hands and feet meticulously measured proportions, nail shape, flexibility. They needed grace and elegance for delicate tasks, like massage.
Assessing the spine's straightness, shoulder symmetry, it's just
Yeah.
reducing a person to a list of traits.
Exactly. But the scrutiny went far deeper than just the physical inventory. The psychological evaluation involved a series of questions about family, education, even dreams and fears.
But not out of interest, you said.
Not at all. It was purely to determine psychological malleability. So when Ahmad, maybe instinctively, whispers his fear of never seeing his family again, the examiner doesn't offer comfort. He coldly notes it down.
What does he write?
Something like, fear of abandonment indicates strong family bonds, which suggests capacity for emotional attachment. This can be redirected toward his masters with proper training. It's a terrifying example of weaponizing a child's deepest fears.
Wow, that's incredibly calculated. Then came the tests of obedience.
And pliability, yes.
Yeah.
The examiner would issue increasingly complex commands. Raise your right hand, now touch your left ear, now kneel, now stand and turn in a circle. He wasn't just observing compliance, like did the boy follow orders. He was watching the grace of Ahmad's movements, the speed of his comprehension, the way he held his body.
And every response mattered.
Every single response would directly affect his future training regimen and, ultimately, his placement within the palace hierarchy. They even delved into cosmetic enhancement right there. The examiner might produce a small vial of perfumed oil.
To test it on his skin.
Exactly. Applying it to Ahmad's skin to test its absorption rate and how his natural scent combined with the fragrance. His skin was seen literally as a canvas that would be painted and decorated according to the very precise aesthetic preferences of his future masters.
And you mentioned something even more chilling, pain tolerance tests, disguised as medical procedures.
Yes. Needles and pressure were applied, not to heal anything, obviously, but to determine precisely how much discomfort he can endure without breaking.
So if he didn't cry out.
If Ahmad managed not to cry out, the notation was brutal. Good pain tolerance. This one can handle the more demanding aspects of training without psychological damage. His very capacity to suffer was evaluated as a positive, useful trait. And the final layers of this dehumanization involved testing Ahmad's natural reflexes and responses to different types of touch. The examiner's hands moved across his body with clinical precision, noting which areas were most sensitive, which touches produced the strongest reactions, involuntary reactions. This data was then used to develop specialized training programs designed to enhance his responsiveness to his future master's desires.
So his own body's reactions were being cataloged against him.
Precisely. Ahmad's struggle to maintain any sense of self was gradually, systematically eroded as he was reduced entirely to a collection of valuable traits that could be refined and exploited.
So what was the outcome then, after all this invasive examination?
Well, boys deemed to have defects, even minor ones, were relegated to lesser roles or sometimes rejected entirely, their fate uncertain.
But Ahmad, in our example, with his exceptional beauty and apparent psychological suitability.
He receives the highest classification, which sounds like a privilege, but it was, in its essence, horrific. It marked him for the most intense exploitation.
This is all documented.
Meticulously documented. This entire process was as thorough as any modern corporate system, bizarrely enough. Detailed records followed the boys throughout their training and service, providing handlers with comprehensive information about their characteristics, their reactions, their potential uses. Metal tags were then placed around their necks, starkly marking them as property of the palace, providing a quick, chilling reference for their new owners.
God, the efficiency of it all is horrifying. You mentioned the examiner's final report.
Yeah, it would be delivered with cold efficiency, summarizing the inventory of the day. Something like 17 boys examined, 14 approved for training. The clinical language just strips away all pretense of humanity. It reduces these individuals to numbers, classifications, and potential return on investment.
And this wasn't the end for them, just the beginning of the next stage.
Exactly. This process wasn't an end, but merely a beginning, leading to further training, further transformation, further erasure of their past selves. The examination chamber, once emptied, would be cleaned and prepared for the next group of boys, each cycle feeding an insatiable demand within these courts. This systematic dehumanization, this treatment of children purely as merchandise, it offers crucial insight into the dangerous blueprint for commodifying human life. By meticulously reducing individuals to their component valuable traits, and then systematically eroding their selfhood, they established a horrifying return on investment model that, sadly, in various forms, still echoes in the darkest corners of exploitation today.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us today, hearing these stories from centuries past?
Well, I think this historical practice connects powerfully to the ongoing struggle against human trafficking and child exploitation. It really emphasizes the critical importance of vigilance
Vigilance against what specifically?
against any systems, subtle or overt, that begin to reduce people, especially the vulnerable, to just their utility value or a mere collection of attributes rather than seeing their whole humanity.
It's a powerful connection.
And these historical narratives are such a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for systematic cruelty, for a meticulous organization and exploitation. If history shows us the horrifying blueprint for how individuals can be reduced to commodities, it really begs the question, doesn't it? What forms of evaluation or categorization might we still unwittingly accept or maybe overlook in our own time that subtly begin to reduce individuals to mere utility? What's the cost when we stop seeing the whole person?